Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are the Daily Mail's North East football correspondent Craig Hope and the Times football reporter Charlotte Dunker. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages as they reach us after a busy night of football. Sun back page lead, Manchester United head coach Ruben Amorim. A sorry episode, Ruben Telly and Team Dig apology. And a great headline at the top there for Man City's loss. That's insane. For those listening, spelt like the river in Paris. Pep's Paris pain as City toss away 2-goal lead. Inside pages of the Telegraph, Ruben Amorim. I'm sorry I ranted, but I could do it again. Portugal knows all about Amorim's temper. He saw psychologists to control it. Discuss that. And in the back page of The Guardian, stunned in Paris, Guardiola's men at risk of exit after collapse. Amorim regret over, quote, worst United side ever tirade. And they also carry the story on Manchester City being accused of encouraging a Real Valladolid player to break his contract. Well, let's start with that thrilling game in Paris. Manchester City's Champions League hopes are hanging in the balance after defeat to PSG. Pep Guardiola's side need to win the final game of the group phase to claim a playoff place. This after they led 2-0 early in the second half through goals from Grealish and Haaland. Back page of The Guardian then, let's revisit that. Stunned in Paris, David Heitner with a match report. Guardiola's men at risk of exit after collapse. João Neves pictured celebrating after putting PSG ahead after they'd fought from 2 down at the Parc des Princes. Craig, how damaging, devastating a night for Manchester City was this?
Well, at half-time, Teddy, I really did worry you might have nothing to talk about on this show. As it stands, we probably need more than half an hour. Now, when they go 2-0 up, the City of old, what would they have done? They would have controlled that game, they would have taken the sting out of it, and they would have seen it home with absolutely no fuss. But given everything we've seen this season, and the changes, by the way, Pep Guardiola tried to make changes to influence this match, and the changes ended up having a negative effect on his team. Gundogan coming on, John Stones coming on, it just didn't work. But it wasn't just that. It was those already there. And the big thing I took from this, and I guess we already know it from all of the troubles this season, is Manchester City have got no legs. And up against a PSG team that are so different to the PSG of old. Now, you can get away with having no legs if you see out a lead against Messi, Mbappe and Neymar, players who didn't want to run. Now, I've covered PSG quite a lot in the last couple of seasons. You know, that iteration, the Galactico experiment, didn't work. And I've got to know quite a lot of the journalists around PSG and the staff there as well. And they're really relieved and they're really pleased that PSG are going in a different direction. And what we saw tonight was all of that coming together. Listen, they haven't had a very good Champions League campaign, but they've got honest players in there. They've got players who run, players who work, the intensity. And when City took that 2-goal lead, at no point did you think it was comfortable. And the manner in which Paris got themselves back in it really was breathtaking to watch. But it was a horror show for City. No control, as the horror show just pops up the headline on screen there. No control whatsoever. Where they find themselves now in this Champions League group, it speaks to everything that has gone before for them this season.
Yeah, greatest capitulation of all is the headline there. Jason Burt for the Telegraph, Craig. I mean, what do you think? There's signings coming in from Manchester City, but is this a problem that's easily and quickly solved?
I would hope the players they're bringing in, the quality they need above everything else, Terry, as I've already touched on there, they need some athleticism in there. Ilkay Gundogan's come back from his gap year in Barcelona. He can't run anymore. Kevin De Bruyne at 33, rising 34, just is nowhere near the same player. He can't run anymore. Jack Grealish doesn't really have that legs. I know, credit to him, he come on and scored a very good goal. Phil Foden, does he have the legs? Bernardo Silva. You then bringing on John Stones and the decision to take Ruben Dias off at half-time. I know they went into that 2-goal lead, but at no point, and it comes back to that word, it's control. And I said this a few weeks ago that I really think City as a club, even Pep himself, have really been caught sleeping on the job. And that is evidenced by the fact that they've gone out now and spent all of this money in January. They've allowed players to depreciate in terms of their value. They've got older. They haven't got that speed, that intensity. And what Pep wants to do, he's just not able to do it with the tools currently at his disposal. And that is what we've seen all season. And that is why we're seeing now this January trolley dash. I was talking this morning to an agent, a former pro, in fact, and he he said to me he thinks Manchester City might just be hitting their stride at the right time. You know, don't rule them out getting back into this title race. I disagreed at the time, and I disagree even more so after watching that tonight. City will be lucky to finish in the top four, and they'll be lucky, even though this format is very forgiving. They should probably go and beat Club Brugge next week and still go through. But would we be at all surprised if that was a difficult night? Probably not. At least it's given us something to look forward to next week.
Yeah, difficult night potentially. Charlotte, what did you make of it? They've got the Mail headline here. City blow 2-goal lead to leave Champions League hopes hanging by a thread. Pain in Paris. Jack Gaughan there for the Mail. Is it an easy problem solved, Charlotte? What's your read on things that we saw tonight? Because it looked good at one point, didn't it?
I think possibly the most damning assessment of Manchester City's season is that when they went 2-0 up in the past, where we would expect them to run out 3, 4, 5-0 winners, I don't think they ever looked comfortable. I think, to be honest, they were lucky to be 2 goals ahead, and I think it just showed the sort of season that they're having. They couldn't see the win out. They were frail at the back, and like Craig's just been mentioning, these additions that they're bringing in, I don't think they're going to be able to wave a magic wand and fix all the issues that they've got at the back. PSG were good, really, really good at times, but they were gifted opportunities by Manchester City's poor defending as well. So there's lots of issues for them to fix. But I don't know, maybe if they do go out the Champions League, it'll give them a bit of hope. In the Premier League, they've got more time to rest. But I think despite all their problems, that game against Club Brugge next week at the Etihad, I think most people would expect them to win that. But then they've still got those extra 2 playoff games that they really won't want either.
Yeah, just wonder, they've got Chelsea in the Premier League at the weekend too, Craig. Do you think this could be something that could lead them to be exposed more again? What we saw from Paris Saint-Germain, you mentioned the pace of Barcola in particular was very impressive, wasn't he?
Give a blueprint to anyone who's coming up against Manchester City in the coming weeks to back yourself, believe in yourself, get in their face, attack at pace, just have that intensity about it. Don't allow City to control. I don't even think they've got that element of control anymore in the play. We saw that in the first half, didn't we? When, you know, the Paris Saint-Germain weren't really at that level they were in the second half. But even then, City couldn't exert that authority. And given that 2-goal lead, that then, as Charlotte touched on, you know, they then couldn't build on it as they would have done in the past. So if I'm Chelsea or any opponent, Club Brugge, whoever it may be, watching that, I think Paris Saint-Germain have laid the blueprint there of how to go after them. And that is by backing yourself and just by saying, you can unsettle these, back yourself to be the better team. It's what Paris Saint-Germain did in that final half hour. And look at what happened. They scored 4 goals. It might even have been more. It
might be more. It's going to be fascinating to see, isn't it, what happens City against Bruges next week, and we've got the Paris Saint-Germain going to Stuttgart. So look forward to that on Wednesday. All the games kick off at the same time. Should be pretty comfortable for Arsenal after their 3-0 victory tonight. All but there in terms of the top 8. And Rice returns to peak form as Arsenal chase winter holiday. Odegaard and Kai Havertz with the other goals. And Charlotte, was this a significant night for Declan Rice? You think just his 3rd goal of the season? Could this be something he can add to his game more regularly?
Yeah, massive. I think it was big for Rice and also big for Kai Havertz as well. I think there's obviously been a lot of pressure on Arsenal with the injury to Gabriel Jesus, a lot of talk about where are the goals going to come from, that they need more prolific goal scorers within the team. Who can they buy? Who can they bring in? So for 2 of their players there who there's been a bit of scrutiny on, there's been a bit of pressure for them to step up in this game. And Arsenal now all but confirmed finishing in those top 8 places. If you look at the teams that are beneath them, 3 points behind, their goal difference is far superior. So it would take a massive swing for them to drop out of the top 8 and getting that midweek off when the other 2 midweeks off, when the other teams are going to be playing these knockout games, especially if it's Manchester City, who we all expect to come up at the back end of the season in the Premier League. That could really help Arsenal in the league as well. Like it said there, a bit of a winter break, get a bit of time off, bit of time to recoup, go for that last final few weeks of the season. It could be really beneficial. So massive night for them and a big night for Declan Rice and Kai Havertz as well.
And Martin Odegaard getting his 2nd goal of the season, Craig. There's a line of thinking they need a number 9, but is this what they ultimately need in the interim? Is more contributions from midfield?
Arsenal certainly needed tonight, didn't they? Just a night of no fuss where, you know, the step off that crisis carousel, as much as Arsenal aren't in crisis, but, you know, they did need this 3-0 victory. And as well, what's significant, you know, they've got this mini winter break next week. They are now all but guaranteed to go through as one of the top 8. They play Manchester City the weekend after that as well. City are going to have a stressful, emotional night, you would imagine, against Club Brugge, whereas Arsenal can make 11 changes. Don't underestimate the significance of that going into the weekend too. And on the scores as well, I mean, Odegaard, probably, you spoke about Rice needing that, but Odegaard does too. There was this narrative that when Martin Odegaard returned, everything would be right, everything would be okay with Arsenal. I think what we've actually seen in recent weeks, that it's Bukayo Saka who was the ultimate talisman. He's the one they cannot do without. Yes, Odegaard is good, he's in there, he makes them tick, he's wonderful, but Saka's the one who I think you see the big drop-offs. No, it's good for Odegaard, it's good for Rice, and Rice scoring goals. Now, I helped Graham Souness write his column at the Daily Mail, and it's been a bugbear of his for a while now that you've got a £100 million midfielder who doesn't necessarily give enough in that final third in terms of goals. And I would go along with that. So yeah, no harm. A good night for Arsenal.
Let's hope he's rediscovered his goal-scoring form. Can we have a quick verdict at this point on the Champions League format that we've seen? Charlotte, what's your assessment of it? Have Manchester City saved it in a way by being so bad and bringing some jeopardy into it?
I think this week and next week, I think those games will get in the jeopardy that we didn't get, say, in the final group stage games when it was all but clear who was going through and who was going out. But there was just a few games in the middle where it felt like clubs were happy to settle for a draw because the so many of them went through. There wasn't that much jeopardy. But yeah, tonight felt excellent, didn't it? Both of them were going there wanting to win. And the same next week as well. There's so many. Aston Villa, I covered them last night. They want to win next week against Celtic to guarantee top 8. So there are still a lot of things hanging in the balance. I think going into the final game, we're going to have more things hanging in the balance than we did on the previous group stage game. But it does just seem a little bit convoluted, doesn't it?
Well, it's a great night for Celtic as well. They go into that game with Villa. They're sure of a playoff place, which is fantastic for Brendan Rodgers' side. Craig, what's your take on this league format? Do you think it's been maybe more exciting because the big teams didn't quite get hold of it early enough, and maybe it'll be more predictable next season? What's your assessment?
Well, on match day 1, Teddy, I was on here with you, and I was fairly strong. I absolutely hated the prospect of what was in front of us. And have I enjoyed it? Well, do you know what? It throws up a good fixture every week. There's always a good game to look forward to between two big teams. I will give it that. The problem is there's not a great deal riding on them. There's no jeopardy. Everyone's talking about tonight being the first time we've arrived at jeopardy and what a brilliant game it was. Well, it was, but I dare say we'll be sat here in a week's time and we'll be talking about Paris Saint-Germain and Man City both being through in that safety net. Now, if it was a case of, that top 8 or the top 16 going through and no one else, but isn't it ludicrous that you've got 24 teams who will advance to the next stage, so to speak, albeit some of them will be in a playoff? I don't like it. I don't think there is any real jeopardy. When we come to reflect next Wednesday on the 12 teams who have left the competition, we'll be lucky if there's one big name or one big surprise in there. So no, not for me. A load more games to arrive here. And yes, we finally arrived at a match that we've enjoyed and given us plenty to talk about. But will both teams probably go through next week? I think they will. So, yeah, back to the way it was for me. But I will reserve ultimate judgment until next Wednesday.
Maybe it'll be Man City beating PSG in the final after all this drama. We shall see. We do mention Celtic, though, as well. Fantastic result for them, claiming that playoff spot after beating Young Boys. Perhaps that's evidence the new format is working. We'll have our own opinions on it. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Telegraph. Again, Manchester United featuring prominently. I'm sorry I ranted, but I could do it again. Portugal apparently knows all about Amorim's temper. He saw a psychologist to control it. Tonight, welcome back to the Daily Mail's North East football correspondent Craig Hope and the Times football reporter Charlotte Dunker. Let's go to the Times, Charlotte, with some of your finest work. No doubt, I hope, on the back page there in the side column. I got it wrong, says Amorim. Writes Charlotte. Rumour Amorim has admitted his reaction to Manchester United's defeat by Brighton and Hove Albion when he called his side the worst in the club's history was a mistake and instead pointed the finger of blame at himself rather than his players. Charlotte, was it clear to you what he said, why he said it and what he's now saying?
The time it appeared he was very angry. I think I was in the room for that press conference after the Brighton game and everyone couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. This is obviously the first press conference that we've had since then. And interestingly, because it's a European game, he had Harry Maguire sat next to him. So he was having to either row back or clamp down, on what he was saying about the players, and one of them was sat right next to him. So at times it felt like it was about to get a little bit awkward, but Amorim stood up and he said, look, you were made out like I was blaming the players, but the players have got a new head coach. I've come in and I've not made things any better. So he was basically pointing the finger at blame at himself. But interestingly, he said he made a mistake. And in that, he meant that normally he doesn't talk much to the players after a game. He's quite quiet. He'll do his analysis and description to them the next game, but the next day, sorry. But that day he went in and, as we know, he damaged the television in the dressing room, which he didn't make specific reference to. But he did say he did believe he made some mistakes. He blamed it, saying he's a young guy, he's still learning. But then he did at the end of that say, who knows, maybe I'll do it again. So we think can be a bit hot-headed. And also he's very honest, which Craig will probably agree. It's good when a manager can come out and be honest. It makes press conferences a lot more interesting. I think the fans are a lot more interested to hear when managers are honest, and that's what Ruben Amorim is doing all the time. So there was another interesting press conference from him today, especially with Harry Maguire sat by him, and he was asked what he thought of those comments, and he said the whole squad understood that they've not been good enough this season. So yeah, they've got a huge game tomorrow where they need to get a reaction and get a win in the Europa League.
Couldn't help but feel a little bit sorry for Harry Maguire, could you, Craig? Sat there while Ruben Amorim was holding court. He says there, Charlotte refers to that, I don't know, I'll try to improve. I don't promise I won't do it again. What do you make of, what do you call it, brutal honesty, radical candour, stream of consciousness from Amorim? It's great for us, isn't it? But do you think the players will get a bit confused by it all?
Well, it's wonderful for us. And I have to say, I was jealous of Charlotte today. It looked like theatre as we were seeing the quotes dropping through. You just thought, is this real? And it really has. Listen, Manchester United is a newsy club anyway. It's got this propensity to put itself on the back pages for anything else to do with football. And Ruben Amorim's come in, and that has continued. And as you quite rightly said, it would be turkeys voting for Christmas if we were to sit here and criticise them too much. But what I will say is, I covered a game, and I think you were there with me as well, Charlotte, over Christmas, one of Manchester United's defeats, and I sat in the press conference room at Old Trafford afterwards, and it was in the very front row, and the best part of our job is you get a feel for these guys. You're able to sit a few feet away from them, look into their eyes, and really determine what they're about. And I looked at Amorim that night, and I really thought he was the right manager in a difficult moment. I didn't agree with everything he said, but he seemed to be calm. He seemed to be in control. It was a consistent message. One or two of the guys who covered Manu all the time pushed back on, why are you sticking to this system if it quite clearly doesn't suit your players? He said, no, I've got my beliefs and I'm going to do it, come what may. And sure enough, there was a little bit of a turnaround. Now, that was a manager who was in control, even though his message was really strong and he was making headlines at the time as well. What I saw on Sunday was a manager out of control, and he's made it. He could have come in and he could have just been really consistent in that message. I'm going to carry on doing what I do, the 3-4-2-1, and see where it takes us. And I think everyone would have given him a free pass. He's actually managed now to make it about him and his own emotions and his own meltdown. And we're turning up to press conferences now as journalists, as Charlotte was there today. She got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You wouldn't miss this because there's the prospect and the likelihood. There's the prospect and the likelihood that Ruben Amorim is going to say something that makes headlines. You've got to be there. And that isn't necessarily what Manchester United need right now. They needed a coach just to come in and work with the players and coach them. And yes, I admit if there were shortcomings, but not in the manner in which he's doing, not giving journalists headlines on a plate. I said I wasn't going to criticise him for that, didn't I? Not smashing televisions. I don't think it's good for Manchester United. I do think he's the right manager. I think he's a bright manager. There's a lot to like about him. But in the short period he's been there, he looks like a man who was already going under, a man who was already struggling, and he's now making it about him. And I don't think that's necessarily what Manchester United need.
Well, Charlotte, you're doing very well on a long day, we have to say. We appreciate you being with us tonight. It's interesting, there's a piece by Marcus Alves in The Telegraph, which we can go to. It says this is a familiar theme from his sporting days, where journalists loved the openness, but there was a word which they used in Portugal, frontal, which means being straightforward, direct, and saying whatever you want, regardless of the consequences. Do you think he might have to learn to be a little bit more tactful in what he says?
Possibly, but he did say, one of the replies that I thought was quite interesting was he said he could sit there and he could say what people wanted him to say, and he could praise the players and he could praise everything, but he used the word delusional. He said he would be delusional if he was going to sit there and say that what he has seen in the last few weeks since he joined that club was good. So I think there's a certain way of doing it. I think he will learn from that press conference. I don't think he's going to go in fully all guns blazing again. He obviously had to today because he had to slightly row back and make it not look like he was throwing his players under the bus and take responsibility himself, which is what he was trying to do. But I think going forward, like you've just read out in that piece, he is honest, he's upfront, he says what he thinks, and he's not going to say things how they're not. And at this moment in time, Manchester United are not very good, and he's making it abundantly clear that that's what he thinks, and that's what he's saying and he is saying that to the players in the dressing room. So it's not a different message to them that he's giving to us. The message is consistent. They are not good enough.
Really big game coming up against Rangers, isn't it? United 7th, Rangers 8th in the Europa League, looking to secure that top 8 finish. Let's continue Manchester United, but maybe a slight tangent, Craig. In the back page of the Telegraph, Times also reporting this about their co-owner, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, may pull Ineos out of Ainsley partnership. Sam Wallace, Tom Carey and Tom Morgan with the story in the Telegraph. Craig, what's happening here? Is there signs that maybe Ratcliffe is being overwhelmed by the United challenge?
Well, the inference is that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to put all of his resource and time and everything else into Manchester United, and because of that, some of his other interests are going to suffer. I would argue the more interest he takes in Manchester United, the more Manchester United are suffering. It hasn't been a good start. Charlotte will probably give us a better insight being on the patch there, but whereas you had the absent owners in the Glazers, who are making a mess of it, you've now got very present owners who are making a mess of it. That's the only difference I can actually see between the two right now.
Yeah, what's your take on it, Charlotte? Is it a sort of energy, a money thing with perhaps his interest? Do you think that he's realised United is a bigger job and he can't do the sailing, can't do the F1, etc.?
Yeah, United does need a lot of money. I think we saw last week the plans for the new stadium and the hope that what they actually want is a brand new stadium. That is going to cost hundreds of millions of pounds. Where that money comes from at this moment in time, nobody actually knows. It could be something to do with that. It could just be him looking at all his empires and thinking he needs to put more energy into Manchester United and pull out of different things. The only person that really knows why he's done it is him.
Absolutely. We'll continue watching Manchester United with interest on Thursday. Watch back pages tonight after that Rangers game. Let's talk Tottenham. They're away at Hoffenheim, 5:45 kickoff on Thursday. But Ange spent is the headline, Craig, on the back page this time. We've got about 20 seconds. Just summarise this. He's got no players fit, but no money. This could get ugly, couldn't it, for Tottenham?
It could, and I don't go along with this idea that Tottenham are wonderful and they're fun to watch. And I don't just mean it with an isolation of what's gone recently, because there is huge mitigation. I go back further than that. The fun to watch in the same way you've been framed used to be fun to watch. I don't actually think it's coherent, controlled football. So yeah. For me, there's mitigation, there's reasons there, but I don't think he's doing a good enough job either.
Brilliant. Craig, thank you very much for your company tonight. And Charlotte, pleasure to have you both on Back Pages tonight. We'll see you again soon, and that show returns on Thursday after the United game and the Tottenham game. It'll be interesting viewing, no doubt. If you missed any of the show, another chance to see Back Pages tonight at 1:30. The show's also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Up next, a reaction as we get it from Manchester City. Pep Guardiola, after they were 2 up, but they lost 4-2 at Paris Saint-Germain. Champions League hopes hanging by a thread.